But I'm just wondering why the mainstream parties are so addicted to this net zero project when people don't like spending more money. They don't like the idea of more expensive energy bills. So why are the parties promoting it? Let's talk to Head of Policy at Net Zero Watch, Harry Wilkinson. Thanks for joining us, Harry.
Evening, Kevin.
You and I have talked about this before. No one is saying that the climate isn't changing. I'm not convinced it's an emergency. But why do you think that the main parties, the Labour and the Tories, and for that matter, Lib Dems, if you like, and of course the Green Party, why do you think that they think it's popular or it will be popular to say to the people, we've got this system, it's going to cost you a lot more money. Your energy bills are going to be hundreds of pounds more expensive because we're going to put green levies on it. But at least you can sleep well at night because you'll be saving the planet. Along comes Nigel Farage and says, we've got a better idea. We're not going to charge you anything. We're not going to hike up green levies, in order to reach this mythical carbon net zero target. Why do you think the other parties think that it's popular to charge people more money on their energy bills?
Well, we've seen for many years the climate change obsession just grow and grow. We've seen exaggerated claims of just how dangerous climate change will be. And I think the parties responded to that. They thought it was an issue where they could safely virtue signal, safely show that they were saving the world from climate change, and then meet up with their fellow world leaders at these international conferences and pat each other on the back at how much they had done. What they hadn't reckoned with was how people would react when their energy bills go up, when they're told they can't drive the cars that they want to drive, or when they're told they can't heat the homes the way that they wanted to do so. So I think it's been a long time coming, the political backlash. It is a big moment now that you have a major political party offering to scrap net zero altogether. I think we should be asking for more detail from reform. What we have now is a system, certainly within the electricity market, where renewables are now providing quite a significant share of our electricity generation. So they need an alternative plan. If they're going to scrap those subsidies, if many of those wind farms are potentially going to go bust, how are they going to produce the electricity instead? We've created a market that's so messed up now, you need to subsidize almost any technology. But, there is a way forward here where we can still get emissions down, but also get prices down. I think that's where the common ground is. I think a lot of people are still very concerned about climate change and they might be put off by this. There is a middle way, which is that actually, if we introduce competition, we say to the wind farm operators, if you can back up your power, then you can compete with the other technologies on a fair basis. What's so important is that we have competition in the electricity market because it's competition that brings prices down. And, it may be that fossil fuels win out, but, in the long term, you would certainly expect other technologies to do well. We also can look at the regulations affecting nuclear power. There are many countries which have actually delivered cheap nuclear power. We know it can be done. We've got to keep looking at that and looking at what we can do here in the UK to provide cheap nuclear power on a big scale. So reform have finally offered people a choice. If they don't approve of net zero, they can now vote against it. But what we need is an energy plan that can actually bring bills down. And so we want to see more detail about how they would actually do that.
Harry, I'm with Russell Quirk, political commentator, in the studio with me. What do you make of this, Russell? As I say, I'm not against attempts to save the planet if we need to. But I think what's happened here is, and Harry can come in on this as well, these political leaders, the Sunaks, the Camerons, the Starmers of this world, they send out their pollsters, to survey what the public are thinking, and what they get asked is, for a few quid, would you want to save the planet? Would you prefer the planet to be saved, or would you prefer the planet to be destroyed?
Yes, well,
and they all go, we prefer it to be saved, and Sunak and the gang go, see, they support our green policies, but they don't factor in when they do these surveys. Do you want to save the planet? It'll cost you an extra £1,000 a year, because then you get a different answer, yes, don't you?
They're worshipping at the altar of net zero because, as we said earlier on, because we've sleptwalk into believing the climate extremists, frankly. I mean, look, we talk about the scientists and the experts. There's a significant body of science and scientists that say that the planet is warming naturally for a whole bunch of reasons, that actually heat comes first and carbon might follow heat, whereas obviously what we've been taught for decades is that we're creating carbon that then generates heat. That's not necessarily the case. But even if all of that is true, even if we are totally responsible for the overheating of the planet, we alone, with our 1% contribution compared to the rest of the world, are not going to make an iota difference. But even if we could get down to net zero, and should get down to net zero, we simply haven't got the infrastructure, and we never will have the infrastructure, because at the moment only 50% of our energy, our power, our electricity comes from renewables, so from solar and from wind. Obviously it's not always sunny, as we well know for the last few weeks, but not always windy for that matter. But then there's the small matter of
mostly
petrol.
It's windy, but not always.
Yeah, but Kev, then there's the matter of petrol and diesel. Now, this is not just about boilers in our home, and yes, do we want to be poorer and colder? Well, obviously we don't. But how do people think that we get our goods into shops? I mean, it's using trucks that are fuelled by petrol and diesel. We can't change all of our trucks and all of our cars, all of our delivery vehicles to electric overnight. And even if we did, there aren't the charging stations, nor will there ever be, to provide the infrastructure for them. So this whole this whole quest is absolute nonsense. Even if it made a difference, which I contend it won't, we couldn't get there practically anyway. What is the point, and why on earth should we be in a position as the British taxpayer where we've got to pay tens of billions of pounds for the privilege of effectively destroying our own economy?
Indeed. Now, Harry, you and I have discussed this before. There's 1,100 coal-fueled power stations in China. They're building 300 more. They're prospecting for more coal. I think if an opposition party like Reform, or any of the others, if they fancied it, if they really tried to ram these facts home to people, listen, they're telling you to completely alter your lives. They're telling you, in service of this vague notion of net zero, you've got to spend thousands more pounds every year on your energy bills. Now look at what China are doing. We produce less than 1% of the world's pollution. China, willy-nilly, not doing anything about it, produces 28%. That's the point. If people could get this across to the people of Britain, they're going to go, why should we live like Stone Age men when China are doing nothing?
That's right. I think Reform need to explain to people why they're making the change that they're doing, say to people how unjustifiable these policies are, when people are really struggling to be pushing up their energy bills, when people are given the choice between decarbonisation efforts and they see the impact on affordability, on reliability, security of supply, they see what China's doing. They have very different opinions than if you just ask them, do you support the objective of net zero? And Richard Tice was quite right when he said no one had been asked about this, and they have never been upfront about the costs that would be involved with this policy. I mean, what the problem here is picking winners. We think we have a political class that thinks they can pick technologies, whether that be wind turbines, electric vehicles, heat pumps, and just by throwing enough money at those technologies, we'll manage to fix climate change. But the alternative to that is allowing free choice and allowing competition to drive down prices for consumers. If we really are to have an impact worldwide, we're only going to do so because we pioneered a way of going green that doesn't cost the earth. No countries are going to want to copy us in the developing world if we're subsidizing technologies far more than they ever could. But if we can show how to get prices down, then they might want to copy our example. I mean, what we can't have is our future prosperity being contingent on meeting this net zero objective. It has to be balanced by affordability. and national security considerations. If it is balanced by those things, maybe we can have a consensus that works. But it hasn't been, it isn't. And so we need to see a change. And, Reform are now proposing that we should just get rid of it altogether. So voters will have that choice now at the next election.
And is it transparent and honest for Labour to say we will create 660,000 green jobs, to do with this windmill and solar panel revolution and their GB Energy company or whatever it's called that they're going to set up in Scotland? I don't know whether they're capable of creating 660,000 jobs, but if you lurch full swing into the wonderful world of net zero and greenery, you're going to destroy traditional jobs in the oil industry, jobs in the gas industry. So when they say we'll create 660,000 jobs, will that be at the expense of many other jobs in the traditional industries?
Well, it certainly will be if you tax those industries, as of course the government has with successive windfall tax. Then you will see jobs go away in the oil and gas industry. And of course, the Labour Party are proposing another windfall tax and to not be allowing new licenses for new exploration in the North Sea. So inevitably that will cost jobs. They've just come up with this mystical number about future jobs in green technologies. We've had many repeated promises many times before about how many jobs the green industry would create. The government has promised green jobs many times. They haven't materialized. China is actually producing EVs, wind turbines, solar panels far cheaper than we in Europe can. And that's because they have cheap energy that's based off of coal. If you have cheap coal-fired power, then you can produce all sorts of industrial goods much cheaper than you can here in the UK. So there isn't that joined up thinking. If we want to create industries, you have to have cheap electricity. That's at the core of so many of our manufacturing sectors. Yeah. And so, if we got back to basics with energy, focused on the cost, I think many of the other elements would sort themselves out.
Not forgetting, Harry, that while we signal our own virtue, saying no fracked energy for us, we buy it from America, which again doesn't strike me as particularly joined up thinking. Harry, great to talk to you as always. Harry Wilkinson, their head of policy at Net Zero Watch. That's the point.